Hey guys, tonight we're headed straight into the tangled hillsides of Rio de Janeiro, where the sun rises in slow, soft streaks across concrete shanties stacked like forgotten toy blocks. The smell of wood smoke and street market fried dough drifts through the alleys, and stray dogs shuffle past half-awake kids on their way to school. There's a rhythm to it all, bustle layered over danger, hope twisted with fear. And tucked somewhere in those cramped corridors, a boy named Elias was waking up to a world already shaped by crime and survival. You probably won't survive this story if you picture yourself walking those same narrow stairwells. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuned in from somewhere far from Rio's chaotic heartbeat, drop your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The favela at dawn is a lesson in contrasts. Mist curls low, softening the jagged edges of tin rooftops, but beneath that beauty is hunger, the unspoken weight of poverty. Elias, no more than 6 at the time, knew little else. His mother, a resilient woman with a knack for stretching meals from scraps, would nudge him awake with the gentle firmness of someone who could not afford indulgence. The wooden floor of their shack was cold under his bare feet, and he'd shuffle out to fetch water from a pipe shared by 10 households, often stepping over yesterday's trash in the alley. Even at that age, he understood danger in an instinctive way. The older boys lounged on corners, eyes darting, their pockets mysteriously full when everyone else had nothing. They carried themselves with a swagger Elias couldn't quite mimic, but he noticed. The red command, the Commando Vermelho, was already threaded into his world. He'd see their scrawled initials painted on walls and whispered like superstition. Historical records of Rio's 1980s favela life confirmed just how precarious survival could be. Brazil's military dictatorship had officially ended by then, but state neglect remained severe, leaving these hillside communities with little access to sanitation, schools, or police protection that wasn't violent. It was a vacuum the gangs filled, and young Elias was watching the process play out like a live tutorial. His father was absent, a shadow Elias barely remembered. Some say he died in a construction accident. Others whisper he simply vanished into another city to escape debts. Many people still think that such childhood abandonment defined Elias's hardened outlook later in life, though some argue his intelligence and adaptability might have led him down this path regardless. So what do you think? Are we more shaped by what's missing, or by what we fight to gain? At school, a small brick building at the edge of the favela, Elias was bright but restless. He could memorize lessons with ease, yet he fidgeted in his seat, glancing at the door as if the real world were waiting outside. He'd slip away sometimes, following the older boys who ran errands for the gang. He didn't do much at first, just watch them stash packages in abandoned houses or sprint through alleys to deliver cash. What struck him wasn't the danger, but the order. They seemed to know every shortcut, every person of influence, every rule. There was a hierarchy, even if it looked chaotic from the outside. Elias began to crave that sense of belonging. And truth be told, the rewards weren't hard to see. Those boys had new sneakers, while Elias's mother patched holes in his shirts until the fabric frayed beyond repair. The day he first held a wad of money, crumpled bills handed over for standing watch, he felt the shift. It was barely enough to buy groceries, but for a boy who'd grown used to saying no, it was intoxicating. He bought bread on the way home and handed it to his mother. She looked at him strangely, suspicion flashing across her tired face. But she didn't ask. Maybe she didn't want to know. In those early years, Rio's police presence in the favelas was sporadic and brutal. Officers would raid without warning, tearing through homes, confiscating whatever they wanted. Elias learned to listen for the telltale sound of boots on stairs. He also learned that some officers could be bribed to look the other way, a fact that fascinated him. There was power in knowing who could be bought and for how much. One humid morning, he watched from a rooftop as a raid unfolded. Gunfire rattled through the alleyways, echoing like distant fireworks, and people scattered in every direction. He crouched low, heart hammering, watching a gang member slip a folded envelope to an officer behind a half-collapsed wall. The cop pocketed it without a word and waved the man through. That image etched itself deep into Elias's mind. Rules could be bent. Authority could be compromised. By the time he was a teenager, Elias knew the layout of Villa Cruzeiro's narrow paths better than anyone. He could disappear in seconds, slipping through doors and over rooftops. He was still small for his age, wiry and quick, and the older boys started using him for riskier errands, carrying weapons wrapped in rags, escorting shipments of powdery white bricks to buyers in the city, and all the while, he was watching, learning. He picked up on how the gang leaders spoke, how they managed fear and loyalty. He noticed the way they handed out food or medicine to residents after a shootout, how they became something like local heroes despite the blood on their hands. It was a paradox Elias found oddly comforting. One evening, he sat on a rooftop watching the lights of Rio flicker in the distance, thinking about the future. The city below seemed unreachable, a glittering world that belonged to someone else. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a way in. Not as a beggar, but as someone who commanded respect. He didn't yet know how far that ambition would take him, or how much it would cost others. But the path was laid out, and the boy who woke in the favela dawn was already dreaming of something larger than survival. Elias is older now, maybe 12, maybe 13, and the restless energy in him has only sharpened. The narrow alleys of Villa Cruzeiro no longer feel like an endless playground. They feel like corridors leading toward something bigger. He has been doing small jobs for the Comando Vermelho, standing lookout, running messages, carrying parcels wrapped in brown paper. But he senses that bigger tests are coming. In the favela, you don't stay a kid for long. He starts spending more time with an older cousin named Rodrigo, who is deep in the gang. Rodrigo is tall, lean, and always seems to know the latest news. He teaches Elias how to blend into a crowd, how to carry himself with casual confidence even when he's afraid. Elias listens carefully, memorizing every trick. Rodrigo is the first person to tell him plainly, "In this place, you need to be smarter than everyone, or you're dead." The favela doesn't sugarcoat reality. Everyone knows someone who has been killed in a raid, in a robbery gone wrong, or in a settling of scores. Elias's mother doesn't want him spending time with Rodrigo or the other boys, but what can she do? She works 2 jobs just to pay for rice and beans. And when Elias brings home money, small amounts at first, enough for food or a new pair of shoes, she doesn't ask questions. She tells herself it's just odd jobs. Rio's favelas at the time were almost invisible to the rest of the city. Tourists would visit the beaches, sip caipirinhas, and dance at samba clubs. But only a few kilometers away, entire communities lived in poverty so deep it felt permanent. Historians note that this invisibility is what allowed gangs like the Comando Vermelho to thrive. The government didn't want to see, and the rest of society pretended not to know. Many people still think that the state's neglect is what made the gangs inevitable, though others argue that such criminal networks would have formed regardless. So what do you think? Did society create the gangsters? Or did the gangsters create the society's blind spots? Elias is still quiet, almost shy, but he pays attention. When Rodrigo and the others laugh and brag about their exploits, Elias sits back, storing away the information. He learns which police officers are easy to bribe and which are unpredictable. He learns where the gang stashes its weapons, rusty pistols, battered AK-47s smuggled from who knows where, and how to wrap a gun in a towel so it won't rattle. One afternoon, Rodrigo takes Elias along for what he calls an easy job. They meet a man on a motorbike who hands Rodrigo a heavy duffel bag. Elias can smell the sharp chemical tang of cocaine through the fabric. "Don't touch it," Rodrigo warns, handing him the bag. "Just keep your mouth shut and follow me." Elias's heart pounds as they weave through the alleys, the weight of the bag cutting into his hand. They make it to a warehouse without incident, and the older boys slap him on the back, telling him he did well. Elias doesn't say much, but inside, something changes. He realizes that the gang trusts him now. He also realizes how much money must be changing hands. This is bigger than he imagined. That night, he lies awake on a thin mattress, listening to distant gunfire. He wonders if he will be the one pulling the trigger someday. It scares him, but it also excites him. He thinks about the way people treat Rodrigo, how the shopkeepers greet him with respect, how the little kids stare at him like he's a hero. Elias wants that. It isn't long before the gang leaders notice Elias's quick mind. They start asking him to handle more complicated tasks, delivering messages to rival factions, picking up payments from corrupt police officers, even organizing smaller boys to watch the alleys during drug deals. Elias takes to it naturally. He's good at reading people, good at staying calm. One evening, he's sitting with a group of older gang members when a police patrol passes by. Everyone else tenses, ready to run, but Elias just keeps talking, pretending nothing is wrong. The officers glance at the group and move on. One of the gang leaders gives Elias an approving nod. "That kid doesn't flinch," he mutters. By the time he's 15, Elias has become indispensable. He knows every alley, every hiding spot, every cop who can be paid off. He has also learned the value of generosity. Like the older bosses, he makes sure to help the favela residents, giving food to families in need, paying for medicine when a child is sick. He understands that loyalty is bought with more than fear, but his world is also becoming more dangerous. Rival gangs are pushing closer, and police raids are getting more frequent. One night, Elias is jolted awake by shouting and gunfire. He crawls to the window and sees armored police vehicles rolling up the hill, their headlights cutting through the dark. He grabs a pistol, his first, and waits in the corner of the room. The raid lasts for hours. When it's over, several houses have been destroyed, and 2 of Elias' friends are dead. The next morning, he walks through the debris, numb. He sees a woman crying over the body of her son. He watches as gang members clean blood off the pavement, and he realizes with a cold certainty that this life will only get more violent. But Elias is no longer just a boy trying to survive. He's becoming someone who can thrive in chaos. And whether he admits it or not, he's beginning to like the power, The streets of Villa Cruzeiro are buzzing with rumors, and Elias feels the tension in the air as he moves through the narrow passages. He's around 16 now, sharper and more confident, but the favela has become even more dangerous. Rival factions are circling, and the Comando Vermelho, his faction, is preparing for a serious confrontation. It's during this period that Elias has his first real brush with the organization's core. Up to now, he's been a loyal worker bee, carrying out orders and earning respect, but never close enough to the inner circle to understand its workings. That changes when Rodrigo, the cousin who has been his mentor, pulls him aside one evening. "There's someone you need to meet," Rodrigo says, his voice low. "Don't talk unless they ask you something, and for God's sake, don't look nervous." They climb a steep set of stairs to a fortified house at the top of the favela. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke. Men in expensive sneakers and gold chains sit around a table piled with cash and firearms. Elias recognizes some of them. These are the higher-ups in the Comando Vermelho. At the center of the table is a man named Orlando, a mid-level boss known for his quick temper. He eyes Elias for a long moment before speaking. "Rodrigo says you're good with details," Orlando says. "We need someone to watch the movements of the police near the highway." "Think you can handle that?" Elias nods, careful not to speak too quickly. Inside, his heart is pounding. This isn't just a job, it's a test. The assignment requires him to spend long hours perched on rooftops overlooking the main roads, noting the times and patterns of police patrols. He records everything in a small notebook and reports back. Orlando seems pleased. "He's sharp," he tells Rodrigo. "Keep him close." This is Elias's first step into the organization's operational core. He begins to understand the structure of the Comando Vermelho, how the lieutenants manage drug sales, how the money is laundered through small businesses, how weapons are moved through secret routes. Historians often describe the Red Command as a parallel government in the favelas during the 1990s and early 2000s, and Elias is starting to see why. Many people still think that the Brazilian government's absence made this shadow power structure inevitable, do you? As his responsibilities grow, so does his reputation. Favela residents begin to know his name. Shopkeepers greet him with respect. Mothers quietly ask him for help when they can't afford food. Elias responds with calculated generosity, slipping cash to those who need it most. He has learned from the older bosses that loyalty built on gratitude is harder to break than loyalty built on fear alone. But danger lurks everywhere. One afternoon, a shootout erupts between Comando Vermelho and a rival faction over a disputed street corner. Elias is pinned down behind a crumbling wall, bullets whizzing past his head. He grips his pistol tightly, terrified. Rodrigo is beside him, yelling instructions, firing back. It feels like an eternity before the gunfire stops. When they finally stand, 2 of their crew are dead. That night, Elias can't sleep. He stares at the ceiling of his small room, the sounds of the gunfight replaying in his mind. He's seen death before, but never so close. The next morning, he steels himself and goes back to work. He knows he can't show weakness. The police raids intensify during this time, sweeping through Villa Cruzeiro with armored vehicles and tear gas. Elias watches the chaos unfold and realizes that these raids rarely capture the real bosses. Instead, it's the low-level workers and innocent residents who pay the price. He grows even more cautious, learning to disappear at the first sign of trouble. By now, Elias is beginning to stand out. He's organized, disciplined, and unusually calm under pressure. Orlando notices, and one day he calls Elias into his office, a small back room in the fortified house. "You've got potential," Orlando says, sliding a stack of cash across the table. "Use it wisely. Build your crew. We'll be watching." Elias takes the money without a word. He knows this isn't just payment. It's an invitation to rise higher, but ambition is a dangerous thing in the favela. Others are watching him too, and not everyone is pleased. Rival factions are growing bolder, and whispers of betrayal begin to spread. Elias senses that he's entering a new phase of his life, one where every decision could mean the difference between power and death. He sits on a rooftop one evening, overlooking the lights of Rio. The city feels close, but also impossibly far away, like a dream that isn't meant for people like him. Still, he can't help imagining it, what it would feel like to step into that world as someone important. He knows now that he's on a path he can't easily leave. And with every step deeper into the Comando Vermelho, the stakes are rising. Elias is no longer the quiet kid who kept to the corners of Villa Cruzeiro. At 17, he is quickly becoming a trusted player in the Comando Vermelho. His work for Orlando, the mid-level boss who first noticed him, is steady and meticulous. He delivers, always. And in a place where mistakes can get you killed, that makes him valuable. This is when the first big job comes. Elias receives a summons one night. Rodrigo shows up at his door with a single sentence. "The boss wants you on this one." No explanation, no details. Elias follows, trying to mask the surge of adrenaline coursing through him. They gather at the fortified house atop the favela, the same one Elias entered months ago. But this time, it isn't just Orlando. There are men from higher up in the Red Command structure, their presence unmistakable in the air. One of them lays out the plan. A major shipment of arms is arriving, and they need it transported discreetly to another stronghold. It's risky. The police are on alert, and a rival faction has been sniffing around the area. Elias is assigned a crucial role. He and two others will ride in the lead car, scouting for police checkpoints and warning the convoy if they need to divert. It's a test of nerves, precision, and trust. On the night of the operation, the favela is wrapped in darkness, the streets unusually silent. Elias climbs into the passenger seat of a beat-up hatchback, his eyes scanning the shadows. They roll out slowly, headlights off until they reach the main road. His heart pounds with every turn. At one point, they spot flashing lights ahead, a police checkpoint. The driver looks at Elias, waiting for the call. Elias keeps his voice even. "Turn left. Now." They veer down a narrow side street, barely missing a stray dog. The convoy follows at a distance, engines humming low. For hours, they weave through Rio's underbelly, avoiding detection. When they finally arrive at the drop point, a decrepit warehouse near the port, Elias exhales for the first time all night. They unload crates of rifles and ammunition, stacking them neatly. Orlando approaches Elias afterward, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Good work," he says, his tone uncharacteristically warm. "You didn't panic. That's rare." The praise doesn't go unnoticed. Within days, Elias is given more responsibility, organizing crews for small deals, overseeing the collection of payments, even negotiating with local vendors who want a cut of the gang's protection racket. He has stepped out of the shadows, but with this new role comes new enemies. Not everyone in the Red Command is pleased to see a teenager rising so quickly. Older men with more time in the gang view him as a threat. Elias senses the hostility, but doesn't confront it. He's learned that direct challenges can end badly. Instead, he focuses on results, bringing in money, keeping his crew disciplined, earning the loyalty of the people around him. The favela residents notice the shift too. Elias, once a kid who fetched water for his mother, now walks with quiet authority. He still helps where he can, paying for medicine, handing out food parcels, covering funeral costs for those who can't afford them. This generosity wins him allies. Many people still think that this Robin Hood approach was what kept Elias alive as long as he was, though others argue it was his sheer cunning. What do you think? Was it kindness or calculation? Around this time, Rio's police presence in the favelas intensifies. Crackdowns become more frequent, sometimes daily, and Elias learns to expect raids at any hour. One night, the police storm Villa Cruzeiro with helicopters and armored vehicles. Elias and his crew barely escape through a series of hidden tunnels connecting the houses. He crouches in the dark, breathing shallowly as boots thunder overhead. When the raid ends, half the favela is in ruins. Homes are splintered, belongings scattered. Elias helps rebuild, passing out supplies and comforting the residents. It's another reminder of how the state's violence often alienates the very communities it claims to protect. Historians note that these heavy-handed tactics often strengthened gang control instead of weakening it, a paradox that Elias understands instinctively. His growing profile also draws the attention of journalists. News crews film the aftermath of raids, capturing images of young men with guns patrolling the alleys. Elias keeps his face out of view, but he knows the cameras are circling closer. It's only a matter of time before someone names him publicly. That thought doesn't scare him. Not yet. Instead, he's thinking about the future. He's starting to see the bigger picture. The drug routes, the alliances with other factions, the connections to corrupt officials. He knows that power in the favelas isn't just about muscle. It's about information. And Elias, with his sharp memory and quiet presence, is very good at gathering information. One night, he sits on the same rooftop where he used to dream as a boy. The city stretches out below him, glittering in the distance. He thinks about Rodrigo, about Orlando, about the men at the top of the Red Command. He wonders how high he can climb before someone tries to knock him down, but the thought doesn't make him hesitate. If anything, it strengthens his resolve. Elias isn't just surviving anymore. He's building something, and he's willing to take whatever risks it takes to reach the next level. The first big job was a turning point, but Elias knew better than to get comfortable. In the favelas of Rio, one good night doesn't guarantee survival. At 18, he is aware that every day brings fresh dangers. Rival factions are pushing harder, and the police seem determined to make examples out of anyone with even a whiff of power. But Elias is also beginning to understand the subtler forms of survival, the ones that don't rely on guns or fear alone. It's during this time that Elias starts forging relationships with the police, or at least with the ones willing to talk. Corruption has long been a reality in Rio's security forces, and Elias sees it for what it is, an opportunity. He learns which officers can be bribed, which ones will accept payment to delay raids, and which ones are simply too unpredictable to deal with. Rodrigo helps broker some of the first meetings. They are quiet affairs, conducted in back rooms of small shops or out-of-the-way bars. The exchanges are simple. Money changes hands, and in return, Elias' crew gets information about upcoming police operations. Sometimes the officers will even look the other way entirely, letting shipments pass without interference. Elias quickly recognizes how valuable these connections are. "A bullet can only buy you a few seconds," he tells Rodrigo one night. "But information? That can buy you time." Historians often point out that the symbiotic relationship between gangs and corrupt officers in Rio was one of the biggest obstacles to ending favela violence. Many people still think that without these backdoor deals, the gangs would have collapsed sooner. But others argue that the state's inability or unwillingness to invest in real community development made these arrangements inevitable. So what do you think? Would cracking down on corruption have changed anything? For Elias, the answer doesn't matter. What matters is staying alive. He begins allocating part of his growing profits to maintain these relationships. He also takes note of how this power makes him different. While others scramble when the police appear, Elias often already knows what's coming. That knowledge, invisible as it may be, makes him harder to touch. But even with the police paid off, life in Villa Cruzeiro is volatile. Rival factions continue to make incursions into Red Command territory. One night, a surprise ambush leaves 3 of Elias's men dead, and the crew's main stash house burned to the ground. Elias arrives just after the shooting stops. The smell of gunpowder and charred wood clings to the air as he surveys the wreckage. Instead of exploding in anger, he moves with quiet purpose. He organizes the survivors, helps move the remaining drugs to safer locations, and personally sees to it that the families of the dead are compensated. His calm approach earns respect. Maluco doesn't lose his head, one of the older members mutters, using the nickname that is slowly beginning to stick. Maluco, meaning crazy, but in a way that implies unpredictability and fearlessness. This period is also when Elias begins to interact more directly with the Red Command's higher-ups. He accompanies Orlando to meetings where alliances are discussed and territories divided. He watches carefully, noting how the bosses handle disputes without losing face. He admires their ability to balance charm and intimidation. One particular meeting leaves a lasting impression. 2 rival factions are on the verge of open war over a drug corridor, and the room is tense. Elias, seated quietly at the edge, observes as Orlando diffuses the situation with a mix of threats and promises. "We'll make sure everyone eats," Orlando says smoothly, and the tension dissolves just enough for a deal to be struck. Elias doesn't speak during the meeting, but he files the moment away. Words, he realizes, can be more lethal than bullets. At the same time, Elias is starting to consider how to secure his own future. He knows that loyalty in the Red Command can be fickle. Today's ally can be tomorrow's enemy. To protect himself, he starts building a network of people who owe him favors. Favela residents, small-time hustlers, even low-level police officers. He makes sure to treat them fairly, even kindly. But he never lets them forget who made their lives easier. One evening, he's walking through the favela when an older woman stops him. She thanks him for helping pay for her granddaughter's surgery, tears in her eyes. Elias nods, not out of modesty, but because he knows how this gratitude anchors his influence. Fear might get someone to follow an order, but gratitude can turn them into an ally for life. Still, danger is never far away. The police raids continue, sometimes killing innocent residents. The media begins to take more notice of the Red Command's power in Villa Cruzeiro, and Elias can feel the walls closing in. He's careful to keep a low profile, but he knows his name is circulating beyond the favela. journalists are starting to whisper about the young leader rising through the ranks. On a humid night in late 2001, Elias sits on the roof of a safe house with Rodrigo, the two of them staring out at the glowing city below. "We're building something big," Rodrigo says, a rare smile crossing his face. Elias doesn't reply immediately. He's thinking about the fragile nature of everything they've built. One betrayal, one misstep, and it could all crumble. But he also knows that this is the life he's chosen. The boy who once woke at dawn to fetch water is now a man with real power, and he isn't about to give it up. The foothold in Villa Cruzeiro is more than just a territory now. It's a fortress. Elias has risen high enough in the Red Command to see how fragile power truly is. Every day brings challenges: rival gangs testing boundaries, police plotting raids, journalists sniffing for stories that could shatter his growing reputation. But Villa Cruzeiro remains his anchor, and Elias intends to keep it that way. By early 2002, his name has weight. Residents in the favela whisper Maluco with both fear and admiration. He's known as the one who can get things done, the one who keeps the peace even in chaos. And that reputation didn't happen by accident. Elias has spent months solidifying his base. He's reinforced safe houses, armed his crew with better weapons, and organized a system of lookouts to give early warning of police or rival incursions. The favelas of Rio at this time are practically parallel states. Historians describe the Red Command's control over communities like Villa Cruzeiro as a shadow government, and Elias is starting to see the truth in that description. He holds sway over who eats, who works, who is protected, and who isn't. Many people still think that this shadow system only existed because the official government neglected these communities for decades, though others believe it flourished because of the gang's own ruthlessness. What do you think? Was it abandonment or was it dominance? Elias, for his part, understands the importance of balancing both fear and generosity. He continues to fund small community projects: a school roof repaired here, a shipment of medicine there. He makes sure that the residents see him as more than a criminal. When police raids leave homes destroyed, he's the first to offer financial help to rebuild. He knows that loyalty is a currency, and he's careful to keep his account full. But Villa Cruzeiro's growing stability under Elias also attracts unwanted attention. Rival factions resent his influence and begin probing for weaknesses. A faction based in a neighboring favela attempts to smuggle weapons through Elias's territory without permission. When his crew intercepts them, a firefight erupts. Bullets tear through corrugated metal walls as residents dive for cover. In the end, Elias's crew forces the rivals to retreat, but the message is clear. The peace is fragile. That night, Elias meets with his lieutenants in a cramped back room lit by a single bulb. He leans over the table, his voice calm but firm. "We can't let them see cracks," he says. "They have to believe we're stronger than ever." The next day, he orders a show of force. His men patrol the streets openly, their weapons visible. They hold a community barbecue in the center of the favela, inviting families to eat and relax while making sure everyone sees who is running things. Elias mingles with the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, showing the human side that makes people root for him. But he never lets his guard down. The police, meanwhile, are escalating their operations. Armored vehicles, helicopters, and heavily armed officers have become a regular sight. Elias knows that his connections within the force can't shield him forever. Some of the officers he's been paying off are being rotated out. Others are under investigation. And then there are those who would gladly see him behind bars regardless of any bribe. To counter the growing threat, Elias begins to fortify Villa Cruzeiro even further. He has lookouts posted on every hilltop with radios. He maps out escape routes that wind through hidden alleys and sewer tunnels. He stashes weapons and supplies in multiple locations so that even if one cache is discovered, the others remain secure. Rodrigo notices the change in him. "You're turning this place into a fortress," he says one evening as they walk the perimeter of the favela. Elias doesn't deny it. "We need to be ready," he replies, "because the next time they come, they'll come for me." That prediction isn't paranoia, it's reality. Journalists are publishing more stories about the Red Command's activities in Rio. Some even name Elias directly, describing him as a young but dangerous leader. His face, once unknown, is starting to appear on police briefings. Despite the mounting pressure, Elias keeps his outward composure. He negotiates truces with rival factions when possible, often using his reputation for fairness to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. But he's also capable of swift, brutal action when someone threatens his control. He understands that in this world, mercy is a luxury. One incident illustrates this balance. A member of Elias's crew is caught stealing from the organization, skimming profits from drug sales. Elias confronts the man privately. "You know what this means," he says, his voice flat. The man pleads for forgiveness, but Elias doesn't waver. The punishment is carried out swiftly, sending a message to everyone else. Betrayal will not be tolerated. Afterward, Elias spends the night alone on a rooftop, staring at the distant glow of Rio's wealthier neighborhoods. He doesn't feel triumphant. He feels the weight of every decision he's made. But he also knows that the alternative, showing weakness, would have destroyed everything he's built. The foothold in Villa Cruzeiro is secure for now, but Elias can feel the storm gathering. He has power, money, and influence, but those things paint a target on his back. He understands that his next move must be even smarter, even more calculated, because the game is changing. And somewhere out there, people are already planning to take him down. Elias has learned that guns and money can only carry a man so far. The real skill is knowing when to use words. By the time he is 19, he is being called upon as a negotiator, a role that suits his calculating nature. Villa Cruzeiro is his stronghold, but neighboring favelas are rife with tension. Rival factions from the Terceiro Comando and Amigos dos Amigos are probing his defenses, each hoping to chip away at Red Command territory. It starts with a phone call. Orlando summons Elias to a discreet meeting in a neutral location, a rundown warehouse near the port, chosen because it's far enough from anyone's base to discourage ambushes. Elias arrives with Rodrigo and 2 trusted lieutenants. The air inside the warehouse is heavy, thick with cigarette smoke and the tang of oil from the old machinery scattered around. Across the table sits a delegation from a rival faction. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man named Jefinho, known for his unpredictability. He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. "We don't want war," Jefinho says, his voice smooth. "But your people have been crossing lines." Elias doesn't answer right away. He studies Jefinho, taking in the way the man's hands twitch when he speaks, the nervous glances from the men behind him. Finally, Elias leans forward. "We've been holding the same territory for years. If anyone is crossing lines, it isn't us." His voice is low, steady. The negotiations drag on for hours, each side testing the other. There are threats, subtle and otherwise, but Elias remains composed. He's learned that showing anger is a weakness. Instead, He offers small concessions, safe passage through certain areas, guarantees that Red Command won't poach their dealers in exchange for an agreement to stop the incursions. Historians often point to these delicate negotiations as one of the reasons Elias rose so quickly within the Red Command. Many people still think that his ability to keep fragile truces alive bought him more time than any gunfight ever could. But others argue that these truces were merely temporary bandages over wounds that were bound to reopen. What do you think? Did diplomacy save lives or only delay the inevitable? Back in Villa Cruzeiro, Elias applies the same skills to internal disputes. He settles arguments between crew members, mediates conflicts between residents and gang enforcers, and even intervenes when police officers he's bribed start demanding too much. He becomes the person everyone goes to when they need a decision. This reputation brings both benefits and risks. On the one hand, it cements his authority. On the other, it makes him a target. Rivals know that removing Elias could destabilize Villa Cruzeiro entirely. And within the Red Command, some older members resent how quickly he's risen. One evening, a trusted informant warns him that someone in his own crew may be plotting against him. Elias doesn't react outwardly, but the information gnaws at him. He tightens security, switching safe houses frequently and limiting the number of people who know his whereabouts. He also begins to diversify his operations. Up until now, his focus has been primarily on maintaining control of Villa Cruzeiro and its drug trade. But Elias is starting to think bigger. He invests in connections outside the favela, forging ties with suppliers who bring cocaine in from Bolivia and Colombia. He knows that expanding his reach will make him harder to topple. At the same time, he continues to cultivate the loyalty of the community. He sponsors soccer tournaments for local kids, pays for funerals when families can't afford them, and makes sure that essential goods are distributed during shortages. Residents begin to see him as more than a gangster. To some, he is the de facto leader of Villa Cruzeiro, someone who brings stability in a world of chaos. But even as he plays the benevolent leader, Elias never forgets the darker side of power. When a dealer under his command is caught skimming profits, Elias handles the matter personally. The punishment is swift and public, a reminder to everyone that loyalty isn't optional. The media, meanwhile, is starting to take notice of his growing influence. News outlets report on the Red Command's grip over Rio's favelas, often naming Villa Cruzeiro as a stronghold. Journalists begin asking questions about the young leader called Maluco, but they find few willing to speak. Residents know that talking to the press can be fatal. One journalist in particular, a seasoned investigative reporter named Tim Lopes, is paying close attention. Elias doesn't know it yet, but their paths will cross soon, with devastating consequences. For now, Elias sits in his safe house, listening to the distant hum of the city. He thinks about the truces he's brokered, the alliances he's built, the enemies he's kept at bay. He knows that none of it will last forever, but he also knows that in this world, every extra day is a victory. Elias has grown used to the rhythms of Villa Cruzeiro, the quick bursts of gunfire at night, the distant thud of police helicopters, the uneasy quiet that follows. But now the drug trade is expanding in ways he once only imagined. As one of the Red Command's rising figures, he finds himself at the center of a sprawling network stretching far beyond the favela. Cocaine is the lifeblood of the operation. It flows in from Bolivia and Colombia through Brazil's porous borders, hidden in trucks, boats, even cargo planes. Once it reaches Rio, it's cut and packaged for distribution across the city and increasingly overseas. Elias oversees a critical part of this pipeline, ensuring that Villa Cruzeiro remains a key hub. He is meticulous about logistics. He personally selects stash houses and rotates them frequently. He develops new methods for concealing shipments, hollowed out furniture, crates of fruit, anything that won't arouse suspicion. He even studies police tactics, predicting where and when checkpoints will appear. His ability to stay 2 steps ahead earns him praise from the Red Command's senior leaders. Historians often describe this period as the height of Rio's cocaine boom. Demand was exploding, and the profits were astronomical. Many people still think that without those profits, the gangs would never have been able to arm themselves so heavily. Others argue that the gangs simply exploited a market that was already thriving. What do you think? Did the cocaine trade create the violence? Or was it merely a byproduct of deeper problems? Elias doesn't dwell on the debate. He focuses on growing the business. He brings in trusted lieutenants to manage different aspects of the operation: street-level sales, transportation, and accounting. He insists on accurate record-keeping, knowing that missing money can destroy an organization from within. At the same time, he continues to invest in the community. He builds a small soccer field for the local kids, funds school supplies, and ensures that families displaced by police raids have a place to stay. These gestures serve a purpose. They strengthen his image as a protector. Residents know that as long as Elias is in charge, Villa Cruzeiro is safer than it might otherwise be. But the expansion of the drug trade also draws more attention. Rival factions see the growing profits and want a share. Police crackdowns intensify, often resulting in bloody shootouts. Elias begins to suspect that some of his corrupt police contacts are leaking information to competitors. He becomes more guarded, rarely staying in the same safe house for more than a few nights. One evening, he receives word that a major shipment has been intercepted on the highway. 2 of his men are dead, and the cocaine is gone. Elias doesn't rage or panic. He simply gathers his crew and begins asking questions. Who knew the route? Who was responsible for security? His calm, methodical approach unnerves the men around him. Eventually, he uncovers the truth. A rival faction bribed a police unit to set up the ambush. Elias responds swiftly. He arranges a counterattack on the rival faction's stash house, reclaiming stolen weapons and cash. The message is clear. Crossing him has consequences, yet the setback gnaws at him. He realizes that even the most carefully laid plans can unravel. He starts diversifying the operation, investing in other forms of revenue: illegal gambling, extortion, even small-scale money laundering schemes. He knows that relying too heavily on cocaine makes him vulnerable. Meanwhile, the media continues to report on the Red Command's dominance. Journalists describe Villa Cruzeiro as a no-go zone for police, a place where the state has no authority. Elias keeps a low profile, but he's aware that his name is circulating. Maluco has become a symbol of the gang's power. It's during this period that Tim Lopes, the investigative journalist, begins focusing on the Red Command's activities in Villa Cruzeiro. He's already known for going undercover to expose corruption and criminal networks, and Elias's empire has caught his attention. Lopes attends community events, interviews residents, and quietly gathers evidence about the drug trade. Elias doesn't know the full extent of Lopes' investigation yet, but he senses that journalists are getting closer. He instructs his men to be cautious, to watch for strangers asking too many questions. Despite the growing scrutiny, Elias continues to project confidence. He knows that fear alone won't hold his world together. As he once told Rodrigo, People follow strength, but they stay loyal when you take care of them. Still, the pressure is building. The profits are larger than ever, but so are the risks. And as Elias sits on a rooftop one night, watching the lights of Rio shimmer in the distance, he wonders how long he can keep the balance. The media spotlight is slowly tightening, and Elias can feel it. Villa Cruzeiro has always existed in a state of controlled chaos, but now there are cameras peering in from the outside. Journalists are circling, reporting on the Red Command's presence with unprecedented intensity. News helicopters occasionally hover overhead, their spotlights sweeping across rooftops like silent accusations. For years, Elias has preferred to operate in the shadows. He knows that attention attracts the police, and attention can also embolden rivals. But in early 2002, it's no longer possible to avoid. Major newspapers publish pieces on how drug factions control Rio's favelas, often describing Villa Cruzeiro as a lawless stronghold. The name Maluco surfaces in headlines, always tied to whispers of violence and power. One evening, Elias sits with Rodrigo and two lieutenants in a dimly lit safe house. The television is tuned to a news report showing masked men, members of the Red Command, patrolling the favela with rifles. The reporter's voice is crisp and measured. Local sources allege that a man known as Maluco is consolidating control. Rodrigo glances at Elias. "They're on to you," he says softly. Elias doesn't flinch. "They've always been on to me," he replies, his voice even. But privately, he's uneasy. He knows journalists can be relentless, and that their reports could prompt harsher police crackdowns. Tim Lopes' name comes up for the first time during this period. Known for his undercover investigations, Lopes has a reputation for courage and for persistence. He's exposed human trafficking rings and corrupt politicians, often by blending in with the very people he's investigating. Elias hears from an informant that Lopes is asking questions about Villa Cruzeiro, particularly about the Red Command's relationship with the community. "Watch out for him," the informant warns. "He's smart. He doesn't just walk around with a microphone. He disappears into the crowd." Elias nods, but doesn't act yet. He believes that as long as he keeps his operations discreet, the journalist won't find anything substantial. But the warning stays with him. Historians later observed that this was a critical moment. Many people still think that if Elias had simply ignored the growing press attention, events might have unfolded differently. Others argue that once journalists like Lopes started digging, confrontation was inevitable. So, what do you think? Could Elias have sidestepped the spotlight? Or was it already too late? As the media attention grows, Elias doubles down on building loyalty within Villa Cruzeiro. He organizes community events, handing out food and supplies. He funds a small renovation for the local school, making sure the improvements are visible. These gestures serve multiple purposes. They earn goodwill, but they also remind residents who is truly providing for them. One Saturday afternoon, Elias hosts a large barbecue in the center of the favela. Families gather under makeshift tents, children chasing soccer balls through the dust. Music blares from speakers, and the smell of grilled meat fills the air. Elias moves through the crowd, shaking hands, offering smiles. He's careful to appear approachable, even humble. But the barbecue is also a calculated display of power. His men are stationed around the perimeter, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. Everyone in Villa Cruzeiro can see who's in charge. That night, Elias sits alone on a rooftop, reflecting on the day's events. He knows that journalists like Tim Lopes will see these gatherings as evidence of his influence. But he also knows that abandoning the community would leave him vulnerable. If they think they can isolate me, they're wrong, he murmurs to himself. Meanwhile, police raids are becoming more aggressive. Helicopters hover overhead for hours, and armored vehicles barrel through the narrow alleys, crushing anything in their path. Residents are terrified, but Elias remains composed. He tells his crew to focus on intelligence, watch the movements of the police, identify the officers who can be bribed, and avoid unnecessary confrontations. One night, during a particularly violent raid, Elias is forced to evacuate a safe house with only minutes to spare. He slips through the darkness, guided by a network of hidden tunnels and alleyways. When he finally reaches a secure location, he sits in the shadows, catching his breath. He realizes that the raids aren't just about disrupting the drug trade. They're about finding him. And then, in the days that follow, he hears another piece of troubling news. Tim Lopes has been spotted in the area, quietly attending parties and community events, blending in as if he belongs. Elias doesn't know it yet, but their worlds are about to collide in a way that will change everything. Elias understands the value of loyalty better than anyone. Villa Cruzeiro, the favela he's turned into his stronghold, only functions because its residents believe he is more than just a gangster. They believe he is a provider, a shield against the chaos of the outside world. But even as he deepens those connections, he feels the scrutiny from beyond the hills tighten around him. It's early 2002, and Elias begins pouring more resources into the community. He's no fool. He knows that gratitude can turn neighbors into allies, and allies are essential when the police or rival gangs come knocking. He sends men to repair broken staircases and collapsed rooftops after heavy rains. He pays for funerals and hospital visits, quietly but decisively. And he expands his community events. One weekend, he throws another massive barbecue in Villa Cruzeiro's central square. The music is loud, the food plentiful, and the energy infectious. Children dart between tables with skewers of meat, while parents watch from the sidelines, relieved for a few hours of normalcy. Elias walks through the crowd with a calm presence, shaking hands and offering smiles. He knows the cameras will never show this side of him, the one who makes sure there's food on the table. But the residents will remember. Historians often note that criminal leaders who provide for their communities can gain a level of protection that even armed guards can't match. Many people still think that these gestures of generosity bought Elias more time than violence ever could. Others argue that they were nothing more than calculated moves to mask his crimes. What do you think? Was Elias a benefactor or a manipulator? Beneath the surface, tension is growing. Police raids have intensified, and rival factions are probing Villa Cruzeiro's boundaries again. Elias orders more lookouts on the hilltops, more radios, more weapons. He knows that one misstep could spark a war. It's during one of these community events that he notices a man he doesn't recognize. The man is blending in well, laughing and chatting with residents, but something about him catches Elias's eye. His clothes are too clean, his movements too careful. Elias makes a mental note to ask his crew about him later, but the event is crowded, and there are dozens of strangers. This man is Tim Lopes. Disguised as a local, the journalist is attending Villa Cruzeiro's parties to gather evidence of Red Command's influence. He is careful, using a hidden camera to record interactions. He doesn't approach Elias directly. Instead, he observes from a distance, documenting how the young leader maintains control over the favela. Elias doesn't realize who Lopes is yet, but he senses something. That night, after the barbecue, he calls Rodrigo and 2 lieutenants to a meeting. "We need to be more careful," he says. "There are people coming here who don't belong." Rodrigo nods. "We'll tighten things up. But what if they're journalists? Do we push them out?" Elias thinks for a long moment before replying. "If someone's here to write stories, we make sure they can't see what they want to see." The plan is to become even more discreet. Elias begins holding sensitive meetings in different locations each time, sometimes in other favelas entirely. He limits who knows the details of drug shipments and operations. He also ramps up his efforts to cultivate loyalty, ensuring that residents won't talk to outsiders. Meanwhile, Tim Lopes continues his undercover work. He interviews residents quietly, often posing as a friend or relative. He learns how Elias's network operates, how money and power flow through Villa Cruzeiro. His notes and footage begin to paint a damning picture of the Red Command's influence. One day, Elias hears from a trusted informant that someone has been asking questions specifically about him. The informant doesn't know who it is, only that they're persistent. Elias's unease deepens. Find out who they are, he tells his crew, but Elias has other concerns as well. Rival factions are spreading rumors that Villa Cruzeiro is vulnerable, hoping to draw police attention away from their own territories. Elias responds with a show of force, sending armed patrols into the streets. He knows this may look bad to outsiders, but he also knows that hesitation can be deadly. The pressure is mounting on all sides: police, rivals, and now a journalist whose identity Elias doesn't yet know. As he sits in a safe house one humid evening, listening to the faint sounds of music drifting up from the favela below, he wonders how long he can keep control. One thing is certain: the man with the hidden camera is still out there, and when Elias discovers who he is, the consequences will be severe. The murder of Tim Lopes is still months away, but its shadows are beginning to form. For now, the investigative journalist is just a name Elias has heard in whispers, a presence that lingers around Villa Cruzeiro without ever fully revealing itself. Lopes is patient. He knows that one careless move could expose him, so he moves like a ghost through the favela, gathering fragments of information that will eventually become evidence. Tim Lopes is not an ordinary reporter. He works for TV Globo, one of Brazil's biggest media networks, and is known for his undercover reporting. In the past, he's gone to extraordinary lengths to expose organized crime, even posing as a client in prostitution rings to reveal how minors were being exploited. Elias doesn't know these details yet, but he senses that the journalist's persistence is dangerous. Lopes' latest investigation focuses on the Red Command's grip over Villa Cruzeiro and surrounding favelas. Using a hidden camera concealed in a bag, he records scenes that show the depth of the gang's influence. He films community parties organized by Elias's crew, complete with live music and large quantities of alcohol, events funded by the drug trade to build goodwill among residents. He documents how dealers operate openly, selling cocaine and marijuana in broad daylight. Historians later described these images as some of the most striking evidence of the gang's power. Many people still think that if the footage had never existed, the police would not have been so motivated to take action. Others argue that the government had already decided to crack down on Villa Cruzeiro and simply use the footage as justification. What do you think? Was the journalist's work the spark, or just another log on the fire? Elias continues to host these events, but he grows increasingly wary. He notices unfamiliar faces at gatherings, people who don't seem to belong. He tightens his security, doubling the number of lookouts stationed at entrances to the favela. His men begin checking identification, questioning strangers, and reporting anyone who asks too many questions. Rodrigo, ever cautious, brings up the possibility of confronting these outsiders directly. "If someone's spying on us, we need to deal with it," he says one night as they sit in a safe house, the air thick with cigarette smoke. Elias shakes his head. "Not yet. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. If it's just journalists, we can manage. But if we go after them without proof, it'll only bring more heat." Despite his words, Elias can feel the noose tightening. Police raids are becoming more precise, as if the authorities know exactly where to strike. He begins to suspect that someone inside the community is feeding information to the outside world. At the same time, the community's loyalty is being tested. Some residents fear that the growing media attention will bring destruction down on Villa Cruzeiro. Others quietly resent the Red Command's control. Elias knows that fear and gratitude can only hold people for so long. He decides to reinforce his role as a protector. He ramps up his community efforts, funding more improvements to the local school and health clinic. He sends food baskets to families struggling with poverty, making sure everyone knows where the help is coming from. He also steps up security for residents, ensuring that petty crimes are punished swiftly. These actions are not purely altruistic. Elias understands that he needs the community's silence. If the police or journalists ask questions, he wants the residents to have nothing to say. But Tim Lopes is not easily deterred. He continues his undercover work, attending more parties, filming more footage. He speaks quietly to residents, earning their trust. He gathers evidence of everything from drug sales to the exploitation of minors at gang-sponsored events. One night, during a crowded street party, Lopes manages to film an exchange between a dealer and a customer. The footage is grainy, but it clearly shows how openly the transactions take place. It's exactly the kind of evidence he needs to complete his report. Elias doesn't see Lopes that night, but he feels an unease he can't explain. He notices a group of strangers leaving the party early and makes a mental note to ask about them later. Back at TV Globo, Tim Lopes begins assembling his report. He knows the risk he's taking. He's seen what happens to journalists who cross the wrong people, but he believes the story is too important to ignore. And in Villa Cruzeiro, Elias senses that something is coming. He doesn't know when or how, but he feels it in the restless silence that settles over the favela after each party. Elias's unease deepens as whispers of betrayal ripple through Villa Cruzeiro. He's accustomed to paranoia. It's part of surviving in the Red Command. But this feels different. Police raids have become surgical, striking stash houses and escape routes with unnerving precision. There are too many coincidences, too many lucky breaks for the authorities. He begins to suspect that someone is feeding information from inside the favela. He's seen it happen before. A resident gets arrested, makes a deal, and starts quietly reporting on gang movements. But the possibility that a journalist is behind the leaks gnaws at him even more. Tim Lopes' name is being mentioned more often by his informants. Elias can't confirm it, but he's certain that Lopes is operating nearby. Rodrigo brings it up late one night as they sit in a safe house lit by a single bare bulb. "The men are nervous," Rodrigo says, his voice low. "They think someone is spying on us. If we don't find out who, they'll take matters into their own hands." Elias rubs his temples, feeling the weight of leadership pressing in. "We can't lash out blindly," he says. That's what they expect. We need proof. The tension bleeds into daily life in Villa Cruzeiro. Lookouts scrutinize every face entering the favela. Parties and community events are more tightly controlled, with Elias's crew monitoring the crowd for unfamiliar faces. Elias personally questions residents who seem uneasy, searching for any sign of betrayal. Despite the increased security, Tim Lopes continues his undercover work. He knows he's taking a grave risk, but he believes the story is worth it. His hidden camera captures more evidence of the Red Command's operations: drug deals, armed patrols, even children being recruited as lookouts. Historians often note that Elias's paranoia during this time was justified, but it also led to mistakes. Many people still think that his growing mistrust of those around him weakened his network's cohesion. Others argue that it was the only rational response to a threat he couldn't see. What do you think? Did his caution save him for a time? Or did it start to unravel everything? As the weeks pass, Elias becomes increasingly reclusive. He rotates safe houses nightly and keeps his inner circle small. He stops attending some community events, delegating the appearances to Rodrigo. "I can't be everywhere," he explains, though the decision leaves a vacuum that others begin to notice. One night, a trusted lieutenant named Paulo approaches Elias with troubling news. "There's a guy who keeps showing up at the parties. He asks questions about you. He says he's from another favela, but nobody knows him." Elias feels a chill. "Find out who he is," he orders, quietly. "Don't scare him off." The suspicion is correct. The guy is Tim Lopes, and he's getting closer to completing his investigation. But Elias doesn't yet have proof. Meanwhile, police operations against Villa Cruzeiro escalate. Armored vehicles roll in at dawn, leaving homes riddled with bullet holes. Helicopters hover overhead for hours, disrupting daily life. The raids infuriate Elias, but they also create opportunities. He leverages his connections with corrupt officers to predict where the next raids will occur, then moves his operations elsewhere. Elias's influence in Villa Cruzeiro remains strong, but he knows it's under threat. The constant pressure from law enforcement, rival factions, and journalists is pushing him to the edge. One evening, after a particularly violent raid, Elias walks through the favela's narrow alleys, surveying the damage. Children cling to their mothers, frightened by the chaos. Elias stops to hand a woman some cash to repair her home, but his thoughts are elsewhere. "Someone's giving them a road map," he tells Rodrigo later. "It's not just bad luck. We're being hunted." Rodrigo doesn't argue. He simply asks, "What do we do when we find them?" Elias doesn't answer immediately. He knows that the next steps could define not only his future, but the future of Villa Cruzeiro. He also knows that whoever is behind the leaks, be it a resident, a rival, or a journalist, cannot be allowed to continue. And somewhere in the crowd, hidden behind an unassuming face, Tim Lopes continues to gather the evidence that will soon put him in Elias's direct path. Tim Lopes has been in Villa Cruzeiro so many times now that some residents think he belongs there. That's the point of his undercover work. Become invisible, blend into the daily rhythm of the favela until no one questions your presence. But for Elias, the sense of an unseen observer is growing stronger, heavier. It feels as though every move he makes is being recorded. Lopes has mastered the art of keeping a low profile. He dresses like the locals, carries himself with the same casual posture, and avoids eye contact with anyone who might suspect him. His hidden camera, sewn discreetly into a shoulder bag, captures hours of footage. Armed men patrolling the streets, drug dealers exchanging cash, and parties where children dance only feet from illegal activity. Historians later note that this footage, shown on national television, would shock Brazilians who had never set foot in a favela. Many people still think that this investigation was a necessary act of journalism, shining a light on what society preferred to ignore. Others argue that it put not only Lopes, but the entire community in mortal danger. What do you think? Was it courageous or reckless? Elias is growing tired of the shadows. Police raids are cutting deeper, and the rival factions sense blood in the water. They push closer to Vila Cruzeiro's boundaries, hoping the chaos will create an opening. Elias responds with a mix of strategy and force, shoring up defenses while sending out patrols to remind rivals that the Red Command still holds the territory. But it's not just the rivals he's worried about. One of his lieutenants, Paulo, approaches him with more troubling news. The guy we talked about, the one at the parties, he's back, and he's been asking a lot about you. Elias listens in silence, weighing the information. Find out who he is, he says finally. This time, don't let him slip away. Meanwhile, Tim Lopes is close to finishing his investigation. He knows he's pushing his luck every time he enters Vila Cruzeiro, but he's convinced that his work can expose the depth of the Red Command's control. He's already recorded evidence of open drug dealing, armed patrols, and exploitation of minors at gang-sponsored parties. Now he's hoping to confirm the identities of those at the top of the hierarchy, people like Elias. Lopes attends another community event one warm June evening. Music blares from makeshift speakers, and the crowd sways to the beat. Children dart between tables with skewers of meat, their laughter mingling with the hum of conversation. Lopes stays near the edges, camera quietly rolling. He doesn't notice the pair of Red Command lookouts watching him from across the square. They whisper to each other, then slip away to alert their superiors. Back at a nearby safe house, Elias receives the report. He's here again, the lookout says. Same guy, same bag. He's asking questions. Elias doesn't show emotion, but the decision is already forming in his mind. Bring him to me, he orders. Don't make a scene. Just bring him. The order sets events into motion that will change everything. As the party continues, Tim Lopes moves through the crowd, trying to remain unnoticed. But this time, the Red Command is ready. 2 men flank him casually, one on each side, their hands brushing against his elbows as though they're simply guiding him through the crowd. Lopes tries to keep his composure, but he can feel the shift in the air. They lead him out of the square, away from the noise and the lights. Lopes doesn't resist. He knows that drawing attention could endanger everyone around him. The streets grow darker as they guide him deeper into the favela. At the safe house, Elias waits in a small, sparsely furnished room. He's calm, even polite, when Lopes is brought before him. Who are you? Elias asks softly. Lopes hesitates, choosing his words carefully. I'm just visiting friends, he says. Elias doesn't believe him. He studies Lopes for a long moment, noting the way the man's hands tremble, the way his eyes dart around the room. You've been here too often, Elias says. You're not from here, so tell me, why are you really here? The silence stretches. Outside, the night hums with distant music and laughter. Inside, the tension is suffocating. Elias knows he's reached a crossroads. Whatever he decides to do next will have consequences far beyond Vila Cruzeiro. And Tim Lopes, for all his courage, can feel the weight of that realization pressing down like a storm. The air in the safe house feels dense, as if the walls themselves are pressing inward. Elias sits across from Tim Lopes, the faint hum of distant music from the community party drifting through the thin wooden walls. It's a deceptively calm sound, a reminder of life carrying on outside, unaware of the silent confrontation unfolding inside. Elias studies the man before him. Tim is composed, but there's a slight tremor in his hands that betrays his nerves. "You've been here too many times," Elias says quietly, leaning forward just enough to close the space between them. "You're not from Villa Cruzeiro. You're not visiting friends. So who are you?" Tim knows the danger he's in, but he also knows there's little he can do now. "I'm a journalist," he admits finally, his voice even. "I'm here to tell the truth about what's happening here." The admission hangs in the air. Rodrigo, standing at Elias's side, stiffens, waiting for his boss's reaction. Elias doesn't explode. He doesn't even raise his voice. Instead, he leans back slowly, clasping his hands together. "The truth?" he repeats softly. "And what exactly do you think the truth is?" Tim meets his gaze. "That you're running this place like it's your own kingdom. That people are afraid. That children are being pulled into your world before they even have a chance to choose another life." Historians often debate whether this conversation actually happened in these words, but many people still think that Tim Lopes' refusal to back down sealed his fate. Others argue that Elias had already decided what must be done, and nothing Tim could have said would have changed it. What do you think? Could courage have saved him? Or was it already too late? Elias's expression remains unreadable. He dismisses his lieutenants with a subtle wave, leaving only himself, Rodrigo, and Tim in the room. When the door closes, Elias speaks again, his voice low, but edged with steel. "Do you have children, Tim?" Tim hesitates. "Yes," he says quietly. "Then you understand why I can't let you leave here with what you know," Elias replies. "If you publish your story, the police will burn Villa Cruzeiro to the ground. The people here will pay the price, not just me." Tim shakes his head. "I'm not your enemy," he says. "I'm trying to show the world what's happening. Maybe it will force the government to help." Elias almost smiles, but it's a cold expression. "The government?" he repeats. "They don't care about this place. They never have. You think your story will change that?" "No. It will only bring more blood." Rodrigo shifts uneasily, sensing the decision forming in Elias's mind. "What do we do with him?" he asks. Elias doesn't answer right away. He's weighing the risks, the consequences, the message this choice will send. Killing a journalist will bring intense scrutiny, but letting him go could be even more dangerous. Finally, Elias stands. "Take him," he says to Rodrigo. "We'll handle it tonight." Tim knows then that he won't be walking out of Villa Cruzeiro. He doesn't plead for his life. He simply looks at Elias and says, "People will know what happened to me. Even if you kill me, the story won't die." Elias doesn't reply. He turns away as Rodrigo and the others lead Tim out into the night. The streets of Villa Cruzeiro are quiet now, the party winding down. Tim is guided to a secluded area, far from the homes of residents who might stumble upon what is about to happen. He tries to stay calm, but the weight of his situation is undeniable. Elias arrives moments later, flanked by his lieutenants. He gives no speech, no justification. The act that follows is swift and final, designed to send a message. Tim Lopes' life is extinguished in the shadows, his body left as a warning to anyone who might follow in his footsteps. It is one of the most shocking crimes in modern Brazilian history. News of Tim Lopes' disappearance spreads quickly, And when the truth comes out, the country will erupt in outrage. But for now, in the dark heart of Villa Cruzeiro, Elias Maluco has crossed a line he can never return from. The news of Tim Lopes' disappearance spreads like wildfire. At first, TV Globo reports only that one of their journalists failed to return from a story in Villa Cruzeiro. There is hope that he might be alive, held somewhere, but the uncertainty gnaws at everyone. Within days, Brazilian media outlets are in a frenzy, covering the case around the clock. Elias knows exactly what happened, but he keeps his composure. Villa Cruzeiro, his stronghold, is tense and silent, the residents whispering behind closed doors. They understand what has taken place, but few dare to speak it aloud. Those who do are reminded, gently but firmly, that silence is safest. Rodrigo can see the weight pressing on Elias's shoulders. "The police are coming," he says one night, pacing the room. "They're going to throw everything at us. Killing a journalist? The government can't ignore this." Elias doesn't disagree. He knows the Red Command has crossed a threshold. "We'll be ready," he says, his voice steady. "We've faced worse." But inside, even he knows this is different. Historians later wrote that Tim Lopes' murder became a turning point in Brazil's relationship with its favelas. Many people still think that the public outrage forced the government to finally act, though others argue that the response was more about punishing the Red Command than addressing the systemic problems that allowed gangs to flourish. What do you think? Did this tragedy spark real change? Or was it just another excuse for a crackdown? As predicted, the police mobilize in unprecedented numbers. Armored vehicles and elite units begin sweeping through Rio's favelas, targeting known Red Command hideouts. Villa Cruzeiro becomes the epicenter of these operations, helicopters circling overhead day and night. The raids are relentless, tearing through the community with little regard for residents caught in the crossfire. Elias watches from a hidden vantage point as police storm one of his safe houses. He feels a flicker of anger, not at the police, but at the realization that their moves are too precise. "Someone's still feeding them information," he mutters to Rodrigo. The paranoia that has been building for months intensifies. Elias trusts fewer and fewer people, limiting contact to his closest lieutenants. He begins moving constantly, never staying in the same location for more than a night. At the same time, he tries to maintain a facade of control. He continues distributing food and supplies to the community, knowing that the residents' loyalty could mean the difference between life and death. But the fear in their eyes is unmistakable. The murder of Tim Lopes has shifted the atmosphere. One evening, after narrowly evading a police sweep, Elias finds himself sitting alone in a cramped safe house. The sounds of the favela, dogs barking, children crying, distant gunfire, filter through the thin walls. For the first time in years, he feels truly cornered. The boy who once dreamed of escaping poverty is now the man at the top of the Red Command's Villa Cruzeiro operations. But the cost of that rise is becoming unbearable. He remembers Tim Lopes' final words, "The story won't die," and wonders if they might be true. As the night deepens, Elias allows himself a rare moment of reflection. He thinks of his mother, who once scolded him for skipping school. He thinks of Rodrigo, who believed they could build something lasting. He thinks of the countless residents who have looked to him for protection, and then he thinks of what's coming, because he knows now that the police won't stop until they find him. The days following the murder of Tim Lopes are marked by chaos. Police presence in Villa Cruzeiro reaches a fever pitch. Armored vehicles thunder through the narrow alleys with no regard for homes or businesses, smashing through walls if necessary. Helicopters circle like vultures, their spotlights cutting sharp cones of light through the darkness. To the outside world, it looks like a war zone, and in many ways, it is. Elias watches this unfold from the shadows. He's never been one to panic, but he understands the gravity of what's happening. Killing a journalist has brought a kind of scrutiny that drug raids alone could not. Politicians are demanding results. Television networks are broadcasting scenes of police charging into favelas, and the public is demanding justice for Tim Lopes. His lieutenants meet with him in a cramped safe house one humid night. Rodrigo is there, along with Paulo and 2 others. "We can't stay here," Rodrigo insists. "They're closing in. We need to scatter before they catch us all together." Elias listens in silence, tapping his fingers on the table. "If we scatter, we lose Villa Cruzeiro," he says finally. "We've worked too hard to give it up without a fight." Rodrigo leans forward. "This isn't about the territory anymore, Elias. This is about you. They're not just after the Red Command. They're after you, personally." Elias doesn't deny it. He's seen the news broadcasts, the blurred images of himself described as a dangerous figurehead. He knows that the police are determined to capture him, dead or alive. Historians later note that the police response after Tim Lopes' death was one of the largest operations in Rio's history. Many people still think that the crackdown was necessary to reassert control, though others argue that it punished residents more than it hurt the gangs. What do you think? Did the state's show of force protect the community, or only deepen its wounds? Elias decides that retreating entirely isn't an option, but neither is staying still. He begins to move constantly, never sleeping in the same place twice. He uses a network of hidden paths and tunnels to evade patrols, relying on his intimate knowledge of the favela's geography. His men remain loyal, but the stress is palpable. Everyone knows that one mistake could bring the entire operation down. The raids are taking a toll on the community. Innocent residents are caught in the crossfire, their homes destroyed, their livelihoods upended. Elias tries to mitigate the damage where he can, sending money and supplies to those affected. But he knows it's a losing battle. Fear has replaced the fragile sense of stability he once cultivated. One night, as Elias is being driven to a new safe house, the convoy narrowly avoids a police roadblock. They slip down a side street at the last second, engines roaring. In the back seat, Elias remains outwardly calm, but inside, his thoughts are racing. He knows the police were tipped off about the route. Someone, somewhere, is feeding them information. Rodrigo voices what they're all thinking. "There's a traitor," he says grimly. "We need to find out who it is before they find you." Elias nods. "We will," he says, though he's painfully aware that time is running out. The media continues to hammer the story. Every night, television anchors speak Tim Lopes' name, demanding accountability. Elias is painted as the face of everything wrong with Rio's favelas, a symbol of lawlessness and cruelty. As the pressure builds, Elias begins considering options he never thought he'd entertain. Could he leave Rio entirely? Could he abandon Villa Cruzeiro and start over elsewhere? The thought of giving up everything he's built is bitter, but he's pragmatic enough to know it might be necessary. For now, he stays one step ahead of the authorities, slipping through the cracks of the city. But with each passing day, the walls are closing in, and Elias knows it's only a matter of time before his luck runs out. The crackdown on Villa Cruzeiro is relentless. Elias has lived through police raids before. but never anything like this. These operations are larger, more coordinated, and far more ruthless. Entire sections of the favela are cordoned off. Armored vehicles plow through homes without warning, and the air is thick with the smell of tear gas and the echo of gunfire. From a hidden vantage point, Elias watches one of these raids unfold. He sees families fleeing with what little they can carry, children clinging to their mothers. He knows that for many residents, the Red Command is now synonymous with suffering. Yet he also knows that the state has given them no alternative. This isn't about justice anymore, Rodrigo mutters at his side. They just want to make an example of us. Elias doesn't disagree. He can feel the weight of the public outrage pressing down on him like a vice. Tim Lopes' murder has made him the most wanted man in Rio, perhaps in all of Brazil. Politicians are calling for his capture, and the media has made his name a household word. Historians often point out that this level of scrutiny changes the dynamics in the favelas. Many people still think that the government's actions after Tim Lopes' death were more about optics than effective policy. Others argue that it was the first serious attempt to disrupt the Red Command's power. What do you think? Was this about dismantling a network, or simply showing the public that something was being done? Elias's safe houses are falling one by one as the police close in. His lieutenants are nervous, constantly checking their radios and scanning the streets. "We're running out of places to go," Paulo warns. Elias keeps his voice even. "We'll find new ones. The city is full of places to hide." But he knows the net is tightening. He can feel it in the way the raids are becoming more precise, more surgical. Someone is feeding the authorities information, and he has yet to uncover the traitor. At the same time, rival factions are moving in on Vila Cruzeiro, eager to exploit the chaos. Skirmishes break out along the edges of the territory, forcing Elias's men to split their focus. He is furious but pragmatic. He orders his crews to hold their ground without provoking all-out war. The strain on the community is immense. Residents who once looked to Elias as a protector now fear that his presence is bringing ruin upon them. Elias notices the change in their eyes when they see him on the street. Less gratitude, more desperation. He tries to maintain his role as a benefactor, distributing food and cash, but he knows it's a losing battle. One evening, after narrowly escaping another raid, Elias and Rodrigo sit in a cramped room, the walls shaking from distant explosions. Rodrigo breaks the silence. "We have to leave Rio," he says. "Now. We can regroup later, but if we stay, we're finished." Elias doesn't answer immediately. Leaving Vila Cruzeiro would mean abandoning everything he's built, the network, the territory, the influence. But staying might mean capture or death. He stares at the floor for a long moment before finally speaking. "Not yet," he says. "If we run now, we'll be hunted forever. We need to buy ourselves time." To do that, he begins to plan diversions, small, calculated attacks to mislead the police and rival factions about his whereabouts. His crew plants false information, sets traps, and uses decoys to create confusion. It works for a while, allowing Elias to slip from one hiding place to another. But the margin for error is shrinking. The raids are now targeting the very core of Vila Cruzeiro. Safe houses are being raided within hours of Elias leaving them. His men are being arrested or killed in increasing numbers. And one night, as Elias listens to the distant roar of police helicopters circling overhead, he realizes that the walls around him are almost completely closed. Elias knows now that his time in Vila Cruzeiro is running out. The raids are no longer blunt instruments. They are precise, almost surgical. Police units are hitting safe houses within hours of him leaving, as if someone is tracking his every move. He trusts almost no one. Even his closest lieutenants are watched closely, though Rodrigo remains his anchor in the storm. One late afternoon, he slips into a safe house tucked behind a bakery, only to learn that Paolo, one of his most trusted men, has disappeared. He was supposed to bring supplies, Rodrigo says, his voice tight with frustration. Now no one can find him. Elias's stomach knots. Paolo has been with him for years. Could he have been captured and turned by the police? Or worse, could he have betrayed them willingly? Historians still debate this moment. Many people think that the police had already flipped someone in Elias's inner circle by this time, providing the intelligence they needed. Others argue that the police were simply getting better at mapping Villa Cruzeiro's labyrinth. What do you think? Was betrayal inevitable? Or could Elias have kept control of his crew if paranoia hadn't hollowed it out? Elias doesn't waste time agonizing. He knows that hesitation could cost him his life. "We move now," he tells Rodrigo. "Gather whoever's left. We're going deeper into Alemão." The Complexo do Alemão, a sprawling network of favelas connected by narrow alleys and hillsides, is notorious for sheltering fugitives. Elias knows its geography almost as well as Villa Cruzeiro's, and its sheer size makes it harder for police to corner him. He slips away under the cover of night, traveling light with a handful of loyal men. Life on the run is grueling. Elias and his crew move constantly, sleeping in abandoned houses or beneath stairwells, eating whatever they can find. Every noise feels like the approach of a police unit. Every face in the crowd could be an informant. Rodrigo tries to keep morale up, but even he is showing cracks. "We can't live like this forever," he says one night as they crouch in a damp basement. Elias nods. "We won't. We just need one break, one chance to get ahead of them." But that break never comes. The police continue tightening their net, sweeping through Alemão with relentless force. Elias knows that the authorities are throwing everything at this hunt. They want his capture to be public, definitive, and final. He still clings to some semblance of control, issuing orders through messengers to keep Red Command operations running in Villa Cruzeiro. But his influence is fading. Rivals are encroaching on his territory, and his men are growing demoralized. One evening, Elias meets secretly with a longtime ally from another favela. The man's advice is blunt. Leave Rio, go to the interior, disappear. Elias considers it. He could vanish into Brazil's vast countryside, where the police would struggle to find him. But abandoning the city feels like surrender. "If I run now, I'll lose everything," he says quietly. Rodrigo presses him after the meeting. "We don't have the luxury of pride anymore, Elias. We need to live." Elias doesn't respond. He stares out at the city lights shimmering on the horizon, knowing that each passing day makes their survival less likely. Meanwhile, the police are closing in. They have intensified their patrols through Alemão, using helicopters and armored personnel carriers to flush fugitives out. They arrest anyone suspected of helping Elias, sowing fear among those who might shelter him. Elias's network is shrinking. Every safe house feels compromised. Every ally is a potential liability. And in the back of his mind, one question grows louder with each passing day. How much longer can he stay ahead of the inevitable? As he slips through a narrow alley one humid night, the distant crackle of police radios echoing in the air, Elias knows that the answer may come sooner than he's ready for. Life on the run is exhausting Elias. He has lived in constant motion for weeks now, never staying in the same place for more than a night, and each day feels like a tightening vice. Every creak of floorboards, every distant dog bark, every helicopter thrum above Alamo makes his heart skip. Sleep comes in fragments, and his crew is dwindling. Rodrigo remains by his side, a steady presence, but even he is worn down by the relentless pace. "We can't keep this up," Rodrigo says one night as they crouch inside a musty room at the back of a mechanic's garage. "They're everywhere. The police, the rivals. They've closed off all our exits." Elias runs a hand down his face. "We keep moving," he says. "The moment we stop, they'll find us." But even as he says it, he knows Rodrigo is right. The authorities have learned their patterns. They know Elias is rotating between Alamo's safe houses, and they're choking off each route one by one. Historians often cite this period as the final unraveling of Elias's control. Many people still think that the decision to remain in Rio, rather than fleeing to Brazil's countryside, or even another country, sealed his fate. Others argue that by the time he considered leaving, it was already too late. What do you think? Was escape ever truly an option? The weight of betrayal continues to gnaw at Elias. Paulo remains missing, and the timing of recent raids suggests someone inside his circle is feeding the police information. Elias questions everyone. His crew knows it, and the fear erodes morale. Rival factions are pressing in as well. They know Elias is weakened, and they want his territory. Armed skirmishes flare up along Villa Cruzeiro's borders, further stretching the few loyal men he has left. One night, as they huddle in an abandoned shack, Rodrigo voices the thought that has been lurking at the edge of Elias's mind. "We should leave the city," he says. "Disappear into the interior. Start over somewhere they won't look." Elias shakes his head. "If I leave, Villa Cruzeiro falls completely. Everything we built will belong to someone else." Rodrigo looks at him evenly. "It already belongs to someone else. You can't lead a territory you can't enter. We need to think about survival now." Elias doesn't respond. He knows Rodrigo is right, but he can't bring himself to abandon Villa Cruzeiro entirely. It's more than territory. It's the only world he's ever known. As the days pass, the police draw the noose tighter. They sweep Alamo with increasing precision, arresting anyone suspected of aiding Elias. Safe houses that once felt secure are compromised within hours. One night, Elias and Rodrigo are forced to slip out a back door as officers break through the front, barely escaping with their lives. The constant danger is fraying Elias's nerves. He begins moving without telling anyone his destination, trusting only Rodrigo. The others are given instructions at the last possible moment, a precaution that makes coordination nearly impossible, and yet there is no other choice. Elias is aware that he is now the most wanted man in Rio, perhaps in all of Brazil. The authorities have devoted massive resources to capturing him. There is no public appetite for leniency after the murder of Tim Lopes. One humid evening, Elias and Rodrigo find temporary refuge in a cramped apartment at the edge of Alamo. The city lights twinkle faintly in the distance, a reminder of a world that feels impossibly far away. Elias leans against the wall, his voice a whisper. "I'm tired, Rodrigo. Tired of running. Tired of looking over my shoulder." Rodrigo studies him carefully. "Then we make one last move, but we do it on our terms." Elias nods slowly. He doesn't know what those terms will be yet, but he knows the endgame is approaching. The boy who once dreamed of control is now a fugitive clinging to survival, and the walls are almost entirely closed. Elias doesn't need anyone to tell him that his time is nearly up. The net around him is almost completely closed. and every day on the run feels heavier than the last. His circle has been whittled down to Rodrigo and a few loyal men, but even among them, trust is fragile. The missing lieutenant, Paulo, still haunts Elias's thoughts. If Paulo is indeed the source of the leaks to the police, then every safe house they've used, every contact they've called, could already be compromised. "We're living on borrowed time," Rodrigo mutters one night as they crouch inside a sweltering safe house hidden beneath a mechanic's shop. Elias doesn't argue. He's exhausted, but he refuses to crumble. "We'll keep moving until we can't," he says. "Then we'll make our stand," but Rodrigo is growing more desperate. A stand against what? Against helicopters and armored trucks? This isn't a fair fight anymore. Elias doesn't answer immediately. He knows Rodrigo is right. The resources arrayed against them are overwhelming. The Brazilian police have mobilized elite units specifically for his capture, and political pressure ensures they won't stop until they can display him in handcuffs. Historians often say that the final stage of Elias Maluco's run was marked by isolation. Many people still think that by cutting himself off from his broader network, he accelerated his downfall. Others argue it was the only way to avoid betrayal. What do you think? Was isolation his downfall, or the only strategy left? As the police tighten their grip, rival factions grow bolder. The Amigos dos Amigos and Terceiro Comando factions are taking over abandoned Red Command outposts, erasing Elias's influence piece by piece. Elias knows that even if he escapes capture, his empire is crumbling. Vila Cruzeiro, the territory he fought so hard to control, may never be his again. The betrayals keep coming. One of his runners, a teenager barely 16, is captured during a police sweep. Within a day, officers raid a house Elias had used just the night before. He barely escapes through a back alley, sprinting with Rodrigo at his side as bullets shatter the air behind them. In moments like these, Elias wonders if the end will be sudden and violent, or slow and suffocating. He remembers Tim Lopes' final words, "The story won't die," and wonders if they will apply to him too. For now, he moves further into the Complexo do Alemão, seeking cover in its twisting alleys and dense clusters of homes. Rodrigo knows the terrain almost as well as Elias, and together they find temporary shelter in a cramped apartment owned by a sympathetic resident. The woman who shelters them doesn't ask questions, but Elias can see the fear in her eyes. She's risking everything just by letting them stay the night. He gives her a bundle of cash, more than she's ever held at once, and tells her to leave the city for a few days. That night, Elias and Rodrigo sit in silence, listening to the hum of helicopters overhead. The sound never stops now. It's like the city itself is holding its breath, waiting for the moment when the man called Maluco is finally cornered. Rodrigo breaks the silence. "If we're caught, do we fight?" Elias stares at the floor. "We fight if we have to," he says. "But if they want me alive, I'll make sure they take me alive. I won't go out the way they expect." It's a grim resolution, but it gives him a sliver of control in a situation where he has almost none. And as dawn creeps over Rio, casting pale light across the alleys of Alemão, Elias knows the final act of this story is coming. The morning heat of Rio presses down like a weight, and Elias senses something shifting in the air. The Complexo do Alemão, a labyrinth of narrow alleys and tightly packed houses, feels more dangerous than usual. He can't shake the sense that he's being watched, that every doorway and window conceals eyes feeding his movements to the police. Rodrigo is restless, pacing the small safe house they've been using. "We need to move again," he says, glancing toward the single window. as if expecting it to shatter at any second. Elias nods. 1 more hour. Let the streets cool down a little, he replies. But he knows Rodrigo is right. The police are close. They're moving like hunters who know the den is just ahead. Outside, the favela is crawling with law enforcement. Armored vehicles rumble along the dirt roads, their engines echoing through the alleys. Helicopters hover so low, they rattle loose tiles from rooftops. Elias can hear the intermittent crackle of police radios carried by the special operations units, the feared BOPE squads, who are conducting house-to-house searches. Historians often refer to this operation as one of the largest single manhunts in Brazilian history. Many people still think that Elias's capture was inevitable, given the scale of the resources deployed. Others argue that he might have slipped away yet again, if not for a betrayal inside his inner circle. What do you think? Was it the overwhelming force, or someone tipping the police, that sealed his fate? As midday approaches, Elias decides they can't wait any longer. He, Rodrigo, and 2 remaining crew members slip out of the safe house through a narrow back alley, moving quickly but silently. They know Alamo's winding paths better than most, but the police presence makes every turn feel like a trap. They duck into another house, one of several backup locations Elias has kept ready for moments like this. The owner, a frail man in his 50s, looks terrified as they enter. "They're everywhere," he whispers. "They're saying they're going to sweep every home until they find you." Elias thanks him quietly and stations his men at the windows to keep watch. Rodrigo, ever practical, is already packing their few belongings. "We need to get out of Alamo," he says. "Tonight. We can't outrun this kind of force." Elias knows he's right, but leaving Alamo means venturing into the open. It means abandoning the network of tunnels and escape routes he knows so well. It's a gamble, and the odds are grim. Then, late in the afternoon, a runner arrives with news. BOPE units are closing in on their block. Elias doesn't waste time. "We move now," he says, grabbing his pistol. The group slips out through a back door just as police squads begin breaching homes on the street. They scramble through alleys, staying low, hearts hammering as the roar of armored vehicles draws closer. The helicopters above tilt their searchlights toward their sector, bathing the area in harsh white beams. At one point, Elias hears a voice over a loudspeaker. "Maluco, we know you're here. Surrender now." Rodrigo glances at him, breathing hard. "What do we do?" Elias keeps moving, his voice a low growl. "We find a way out. We're not done yet, but the city is shrinking around them. Every alley seems blocked by police. Every safe house feels compromised. And as night begins to fall, Elias knows that the final confrontation is drawing close. He's been hunted for weeks, and he's survived through caution, cunning, and sheer willpower. But for the first time, he wonders if those qualities will be enough. The boy who once dreamed of controlling Villa Cruzeiro is now the man who must decide how his story will end. The night settles over the Complexo do Alamo like a heavy blanket, but there is no comfort in its darkness. Police spotlights slice through the alleys, the beams darting like predators searching for prey. Elias and his small group, Rodrigo and 2 loyal crew members, are crouched in the shadows of a half-collapsed house, trying to catch their breath. "They're closing in," Rodrigo whispers, his voice barely audible over the distant whir of helicopters. "We can't keep running like this. We need to think about surrendering." Elias turns his gaze toward his oldest friend, his jaw tight. "Surrender? You think they'll just take me in, shake my hand, and give me a cell? They'll parade me in front of cameras, treat me like a trophy, and if we're unlucky, they won't even let us make it that far." Rodrigo doesn't argue. He knows Elias is right. The Brazilian police, especially the BOP units currently combing Alemão, are known for their ruthlessness. Few fugitives walk out alive when they've been hunted this long. Historians often debate whether Elias should have surrendered. Many people still think that he might have avoided the decades-long sentence that awaited him if he had turned himself in. Others argue that surrender was never a real option, given the political pressure surrounding Tim Lopes' murder. What do you think? Could surrender have saved him, or was the outcome already written? Elias knows he can't keep evading forever, but he's not ready to give up. He decides to make one last attempt at slipping through the net. "We move to the northern edge of Alemão," he tells his group. "There's a way out through the industrial zone. If we can reach it, we disappear. The route is dangerous. It requires navigating through some of the most heavily patrolled parts of the favela." But Elias is confident in his knowledge of the terrain. He's spent years memorizing these twisting alleys, and he knows paths the police might overlook. They set out just after midnight, moving silently through the darkened streets. At first, the plan goes smoothly. They weave through narrow corridors, avoiding main roads, using the shadows to their advantage. But as they approach a key junction, the distant sound of boots and radios grows louder. Suddenly, a bright spotlight sweeps across their path. "Go!" Elias hisses, and the group scatters. The alleys explode with noise. Shouts, gunfire, the metallic thud of boots on concrete. Elias and Rodrigo sprint together, hearts hammering, ducking into an abandoned home. They crash through the back door, just as bullets punch through the walls behind them. Inside the house, Elias pauses, trying to catch his breath. Rodrigo leans against the wall, panting. "We can't outrun them much longer," he says. Elias knows he's right, but he isn't ready to die on the spot. "We keep moving," he says. "As long as we're breathing, we keep moving." The group pushes deeper into Alemão, the net tightening with every step. Elias can hear the helicopters overhead, the commands barked over police radios. The city feels smaller than it ever has before, a maze collapsing inward. By dawn, Elias and Rodrigo have reached the industrial edge of the favela. It's quieter here, the police presence thinner. For a moment, Elias dares to hope that they might actually slip through, but then he sees the distant glint of an armored vehicle rolling down the street, and he knows the hunt is far from over. The morning light over the industrial edge of Alemão is gray and brittle, casting long shadows across empty streets. Elias, Rodrigo, and their 2 remaining crew members crouch in an alley behind a rusting warehouse, hoping to evade the distant rumble of armored police vehicles. The area feels exposed, far from the crowded cover of the favela's core. Rodrigo peers around the corner, scanning for movement. "They're sweeping this way," he says, his voice low but tense. "If we stay here, they'll box us in." Elias keeps his eyes on the ground for a moment, thinking. "We can't go back into Alemão," he says quietly. "They're sealing it from every side. If we're caught inside, there's no way out." The group debates their next move. One of the younger men suggests splitting up, but Elias dismisses it. "Alone, you'll get picked off. We stick together." Historians often cite this moment as one of Elias's last significant decisions. Many people still think that staying together increased their chances of capture. Others argue that Elias's loyalty to his crew was a rare act of humanity in a world where betrayal was commonplace. What do you think? Was sticking together foolish, or the only way he could hold on to who he was? The group slips deeper into the industrial district, moving through abandoned factories and storage yards. It's quieter here, but Elias knows that the police will eventually expand their search. They find temporary refuge in a derelict warehouse, its corrugated metal walls riddled with holes. Elias tells the others to rest while he and Rodrigo scout for possible escape routes. Rodrigo shakes his head as they walk the perimeter. "We can't keep running forever," he says. "At some point we have to decide how this ends." Elias doesn't respond immediately. He feels the exhaustion in his bones, the accumulated weight of weeks on the run. "I'm not ready to decide that yet," he says finally. "Not while there's still a chance." As night falls, Elias and his crew hear the distant sounds of movement, boots on concrete, muffled radio chatter. The police are closing in on the industrial district. The group hunkers down in the warehouse, barely daring to breathe. The sound of helicopters grows louder. The beams of their spotlights sweep over the rooftops, pausing occasionally as if sniffing for movement. Rodrigo crouches next to Elias, whispering, "If they find us here, we're trapped." Elias scans the warehouse's broken windows. "Then we don't stay here," he whispers back. "We move before dawn. Head west, toward the train lines. If we can reach them, we might have a chance." But dawn brings no relief. As the first light filters into the warehouse, the sound of engines grows closer. Elias and Rodrigo exchange a glance. They know the time for hiding is over. "Get ready," Elias says quietly, checking the pistol at his side. We move fast, we stay low, and we don't look back. They slip out of the warehouse just as police vehicles roll into the industrial yard. The chase is immediate and violent. Shouts, gunfire, the grinding roar of armored engines tearing through the empty streets. Elias leads his crew through a maze of alleyways, trying to stay one step ahead. But the police have tightened the net too much this time. Every path seems blocked, every exit sealed. By late morning, Elias and his crew are pushed back toward the heart of Alamau. The walls are closing in once again, and Elias knows that the next confrontation could be the final one. The heat of midday presses down like a suffocating blanket as Elias, Rodrigo, and the remaining 2 crew members slip back into the maze of Alamau. The industrial edge had offered only fleeting hope. Now they are pushed back toward the tight alleys and stairwells they know too well. The familiar ground gives them some comfort, but it also leaves them exposed. "They're not going to stop," Rodrigo says, keeping his voice low as they move single file through a narrow passage. "They'll squeeze Alamo until there's nothing left." Elias doesn't answer right away. He scans the rooftops, catching the flash of sunlight off metal, rifle scopes, or perhaps just the glint of broken glass. It doesn't matter. The police are everywhere now. Historians often describe the return to Alamo as the moment when Elias's options finally collapsed. Many people still think that if he had left Rio altogether, disappearing into the countryside, he might have survived. Others argue that the police had already set the perimeter too tightly for escape. What do you think? Was there ever a real chance of freedom left at this point? The group ducks into a small abandoned house to regroup. Elias crouches by the window, watching the streets. Rodrigo paces behind him. "We can't keep moving like this," Rodrigo says. "Every time we run, they push us further into the center. We need to decide now. Do we surrender, or do we make a stand?" Elias doesn't flinch. "Surrender isn't an option," he says. "If we fall into their hands, we'll be dead before we reach the station. They won't risk taking us alive." The younger of the 2 crew members speaks up, his voice shaking. "Then what? Do we die here?" Elias looks at him for a long moment. "Not if I can help it," he says. But the walls of Alamo are tightening. Armored vehicles move slowly through the narrow streets, their engines growling like predators. The BOPE squads are methodical, clearing one block at a time. Helicopters hover overhead, their spotlights sweeping across the rooftops. The residents know what's coming. Many stay behind closed doors, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. That night, Elias and his group attempt another breakout. They wait until the helicopters drift farther away, then slip out into the darkness, hugging the shadows. Their goal is to reach an old drainage tunnel on the western edge of the favela, a tunnel that Elias once used to smuggle weapons. The journey is tense and slow. Every noise feels like a trap. At one point, they're forced to duck behind a stack of trash bins as a police patrol passes just meters away. The sound of boots on pavement makes Elias's heart hammer, but the officers move on without noticing them. When they finally reach the tunnel, they find it partially collapsed. Debris blocks the entrance, and clearing it would take too long. Rodrigo curses under his breath. "We're out of options," he says. Elias presses a hand to the crumbling wall, feeling the weight of defeat. "We'll find another way," he says, though his voice lacks conviction. They retreat to another safe house, one of the last still available to them. It's a cramped room above a shuttered bar, the smell of stale beer clinging to the walls. Elias sits in the corner, head bowed, while Rodrigo and the others try to rest. For the first time, Elias feels the fatigue settle into his bones. He knows that every move they make now is being tracked, every step narrowing the gap between him and the authorities. As dawn approaches, he makes a silent promise. If the police corner him, he won't let the end be messy or desperate. He will face it with the same composure he has tried to maintain all his life, because Elias Maluco knows that the final confrontation is coming. And soon, the morning breaks over Alamo with a deceptive calm. For a few brief minutes, the favela is almost silent. No gunfire, no helicopters, just the distant hum of a city going about its day. Elias sits near the window of the safe house above the shuttered bar, the smell of stale beer and dust still clinging to the air. Rodrigo and the two remaining crew members are asleep on the floor, their bodies curled tightly like coiled springs. Elias hasn't slept. He knows that every second they remain here increases the odds of discovery. He runs through the possibilities in his mind. Another escape attempt, a diversion, perhaps even a last stand, but all of them feel thin and brittle. By mid-morning, the sound returns. It begins as a low thrum, then grows louder. The helicopters are back. Radios crackle. Somewhere nearby, the sharp metallic roar of armored vehicles shakes the streets. Rodrigo jolts awake. "They're close," he says, grabbing his pistol. "We have to move." Elias doesn't argue. They gather their weapons and supplies in silence, the weight of inevitability pressing down like a physical force. As they step into the alley, Elias scans the rooftops. He sees movement. Police snipers shifting into position. "They know we're here," he whispers. What follows is chaos. Police units swarm the block, their boots pounding the pavement, shouting commands. "Maluco! You're surrounded! Surrender now!" Rodrigo looks at Elias, waiting for the decision. For a long moment, Elias simply stands there, breathing deeply, as if savoring the final few seconds of freedom. "We keep moving," he says finally. They dart through the alleyways, weaving through the maze of Alamo one last time. gunfire erupts behind them, splintering wood and tearing through the thin walls of homes. Residents duck for cover as the firefight pushes deeper into the favela. Elias leads his crew down a familiar path, but the police are already there. An armored vehicle blocks the exit, and BOP officers pour in from every direction. The group is pinned down. Rodrigo fires back, shouting for Elias to run, but there is nowhere left to go. Historians often recount this moment as the inevitable conclusion of Elias's story. Many people still think that his capture was the only possible outcome given the scale of the operation. Others argue that he could have chosen to surrender earlier and spared his life behind bars. What do you think? Was there ever truly another ending? Elias raises his hand slowly, signaling to his men to stop firing. Rodrigo hesitates, but follows his lead. The police surge forward, weapons trained on them. "On the ground!" an officer shouts. Elias complies, lying face down on the cracked pavement. He feels the weight of knees on his back, the cold steel of handcuffs clamping shut. The helicopters roar above like thunder, and the crowd of residents gathers at a distance, watching in stunned silence. It's over. Elias Maluco is led through the streets of Alamo under heavy guard, his head held high despite the cameras flashing all around him. He doesn't speak, doesn't resist. In that moment, he understands that his freedom is gone. But his image, the myth of Maluco, will linger. The trial that follows is swift, the evidence is overwhelming, and the public demands justice for Tim Lopes. Elias is sentenced to decades behind bars. Yet even in prison, he retains influence. The Red Command is an institution, and its leaders, even incarcerated, can still shape events on the outside, but the world moves on. New leaders rise, new battles are fought, and the legend of Elias Maluco becomes one more story whispered through the alleys of Rio's favelas. The sounds of the city grow faint again, soft and far away, as if carried by a slow evening breeze. The tense streets of Alamo fade into memory, and the hum of helicopters recedes into the distance. For a moment, the world seems still. Elias, once the boy who dreamed of rising above Villa Cruzeiro, now sits in a small prison cell. The walls are bare, the air thick, but the danger and the noise are gone. He breathes deeply, slowly, feeling each inhale fill the hollow spaces inside him. And as you listen, you can let yourself breathe the same way. Inhale deeply, then release it all, letting the weight of this long journey dissolve. The names and places drift away like leaves on a quiet river. The favela's crowded alleys grow softer. The footsteps fade, and even the voices of the past grow hushed. All that remains is a gentle rhythm, slow and steady. You can imagine a soft glow, perhaps the warm light of late afternoon, filtering through a window. Outside, the air is still and calm. Inside, there is nothing left to chase, and nothing left to fear. Each breath grows heavier, more grounded, until your shoulders relax, your jaw unclenches, and your mind begins to settle. You've been walking a long road through this story, and now it is time to rest. Let the last bits of tension flow out of you with each exhale. You are safe. The day is done. And in that quiet, you can close your eyes and let sleep take you gently, like a tide drawing you deeper into calm waters. Good night.